Hello there, friends. Welcome to another episode of Brown Bags and Bibles. Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church, joined as always by
Mark Liebert, one of the elders at First Christian Church, and Scott's partner for all things Brown Bags and Bibles.
Brown Bags and Bibles, where we break down life's biggest befuddlements with biblical basics. And that's a title, Brown Bags and Bibles, that was from COVID world, where people would call in during lunch. So in case you're wondering, where are the brown bags? We haven't had brown bags for 3+4 years now, which means we are into episode number 100 something or other. Yeah, it's episode 100 something or other. I think that's the technical term. I must have had plenty of coffee this morning because I'm Introduction to New Religious Movements. We've been studying the 6 major world religions that come from India, Hinduism and Buddhism, from China, Confucianism, Taoism, and from the Middle East, Judaism and Islam. And now we're talking about more of what's called cults. Usually it's a movement that becomes a denomination or church, that becomes a sect, that becomes a cult. And we're off into cultist type stuff.
Yeah, this, of course, is coming, as we've mentioned before, from Derek Cooper's book, Christianity and what he calls New Religious Movements. So the emphasis here is on these ones that we've been covering most recently are new, much more than the traditional world faiths that Scott just mentioned that have been around for thousands of years. These are not. These are hundreds and in some cases less than 100 years old. So we covered Jainism, Sikhism that came out of Hinduism. We covered Baha'i and the Nation of Islam that came out of the Muslim background. We covered Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses that came out of, Christian background. And now we're starting 2 that come out of what he calls a pagan background. So today we'll do Wicca, may take a couple episodes, and then we'll do Scientology. And I wasn't sure, why does he call these pagan new religious movements? And so he explains paganism is an elusive and catch-all term for a variety of new religious movements that don't precisely correspond to the classical religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. I'm like, oh, okay. Because in my mind, paganism almost has a derogatory term, but he's using it in a different way.
Yeah, he's using it religiously
to a world faith.
Right. Yes, and an ancient paganism was sort of a form of whatever and however I wanted to put together things on my own. That became little, traditions and movements, of course. So, yeah. Okay.
So just a quick introduction from Newsweek. We pulled an article from Newsweek called "The Number of Witches Rises Dramatically Across the U.S. as Millennials Reject Christianity." You can look that up if you want a Newsweek article.
Yeah.
That pointed out there has been a dramatic rise in witches or Wiccans, and you want to give some numbers?
For almost 20 years, from 90 to 2008. In 1990, there were 8,000 Wiccans. In 2008, there were 340,000. So in those 18 years, it grew by 332,000. That's a humongous amount of growth, proportionally, of course, versus the 8,000 it was. So it's not some big, humongous movement that people are aware of as much as they hopefully will be because they're listening to BB&B. But nowadays, there are 1.5 million.
Yeah, now we're up into the millions.
That's a lot.
Yep.
More.
That article says its growth has been fueled by the rejection of mainstream Christianity, primarily among young people.
Yeah. Julia Roys, who does a little bit of watchdog of ministries kinds of things, and some of this sort of new movements, and watches things pretty closely, says that Wicca has effectively repackaged witchcraft for millennial consumption. I think that's a helpful way to say that and think about it. She says, no longer is witchcraft and paganism satanic and demonic. It's a pre-Christian tradition that promotes free thought and understanding of earth and nature.
Yeah. So if you're thinking, well, who in their right mind would subscribe to something called witchcraft or Wicca or witchdom?
Right.
But it's not packaged that way.
Right. Those of us who are our age think of it in terms that younger people don't think of it now
That's
because of that repackaging.
That's right.
And I think it's important to talk about the repackaging.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then you think it is actually distinctly different, and it's really not that different at all.
So Dr. Cooper, again, we'll follow his outline and structure. We'll talk about beginning or creation, or where did it come from, and then the historical origins, et cetera. If you've been following along, you know we're using his book. Again, we always want to give credit to him. Get his book. It would be helpful. Christianity and New Religious Movements. But why don't we jump in then?
So its creation or origin story, many claim that Wicca is centuries old, but it's actually a modern religion that draws from ancient rituals. So it's a modern form of ancient ritual stuff that's brought along. Sources like paganism, folklore, magical arts, the occult, witchcraft, esotericism, naturalism.
Which means like secret, right? Esoteric means secret, hidden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the connotation of secret, hidden, mysterious, and also a little bit of everything-ish nuance. Esotericism, naturalism, romanticism, secret societies, Eastern religions, and mystery cults.
Yeah, he says there's several terms that overlap. So we'll use Wicca as we go through this, but Wicca, witchcraft, pagan witchcraft, the craft, and Wiccan religion, it's all the same thing.
I can't watch any Star Wars or Star Trek movies or something like that now, I guess, maybe, because it's got pagan. The Wiccan religion was officially launched in 1939.
Yeah,
1939.
That's what we mean by less than 100 years old.
Yeah, by a man named Gerald Gardner.
And we'll get into him in detail in the historical origins.
Came up at the same time that laws against witchcraft were abolished in the Western world.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So the laws actually,
The laws were good.
do something. Laws do things, huh?
Yeah.
So it combines magical rituals with prehistoric beliefs and ancient traditions into a modern religion. And I think this is important to also say. It's spread through many popular level books, Hollywood, the internet, countercultural movement. So people think I was just joking about that Star Wars thing.
It appeals to a number of people, disillusioned Christians, college students, social progressives. Wiccans are attracted to its emphasis on inclusion, freedom, and equality.
Yes, in not necessarily theological terms so much, but in old school political and socio-political terms, it's strictly egalitarian in that sense.
Right. So it's found success with the LGBT community, with women who've been hurt by the patriarchy, with environmentalists, because there's a huge emphasis on
the
earth.
nature. Yes.
Right.
And it's important to note that Wicca and New Age are not the same.
Right.
Wiccans emphasize nature, rituals in the past. New Agers emphasize spirituality, self, and the future.
Right.
I've never thought about it quite in those, but that's good. That's helpful.
Yeah.
But they do share some beliefs like afterlife, reincarnation, some spiritual practices, and pagan influences.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk specifically about the historical origins and go back to Mr. Gerald Gardner, who lived 1884 to 1964.
The father of Wicca, he is called. He's from Britain, but traveled widely as a child, as an adult, was interested in the paranormal, and was a member of the Freemasons.
Which is helpful. That's helpful to understand because that's where you get a lot of the initiations and the secret processes and things like that.
Yes, yes. Incantations and things that you have to do in order for the thing to happen or become a part of the next level of. He was fascinated by the exotic cultures of the East where he had lived and studied the customs, archaeological digs, gathered artifacts, retired in 1939 to England, and mingled with a theater group that was esoteric and secretive.
Yep. They invited him to participate in a private ritual in 1939. In this, he underwent a secret initiation and was brought into a coven. We will talk a lot about a coven. It's a clandestine community of witches. And this initiation would become the defining moment for him and effectively for the Wiccan movement.
Yeah.
Because he
Makes sense.
publicized his experience and propagated his faith in several best-selling books.
I shouldn't say this, and because we do this later on, but I can't help myself. Ironically, he publicized a clandestine, meant to be secretive.
That's right.
Thing. Okay. All right.
It was meant to be secretive.
Just wanted to make sure.
But it became well known. Yeah.
Okay. Publicized his experience. Became a high priest in this,
Right.
and attracted many who joined his coven. He was ordained as a Christian priest, then started a witch museum, and then participated in Druid ceremonies.
He was all over the place.
Yeah, he was. So he is the father, highly influential, died in 1964.
Yeah. So Gardnerian Wicca, I think that's how you pronounce it, based on him,
Sure.
is the most traditional denomination within Wicca. And of course, it's based on his teachings, Gardner's teachings.
Yeah.
And that dominates, according to Dr. Cooper, that dominates the religious landscape of witchcraft. Almost every Wiccan tradition began with Gardner. And of course, it's based on his Book of Shadows. That's the book that he published. The emphasis is on goddess versus god, high priestess versus high priest.
And that's some of that egalitarian
Yes.
way of framing everything. A high percentage of members are females, but the rituals balance male and female into pairs.
Yeah.
I wonder what that high percentage is.
Yeah.
It's interesting that a high percentage of members are females, but all the rituals balance male and female into pairs. They assemble in covens, restricted and performed, meaning the coven itself is restricted in the numbers, I guess. Certainly how you are into it or not, restricted, and they are all performed in the nude as they assemble.
Yeah, they call it skyclad. And again, it's not that everything is done in the nude, but very specific circles and covens are done that way. Very restricted, and yeah, that's interesting.
Which means probably they go through a lot of training for a year and a day.
Always a year and a day. Go through the outer court of training before they're allowed to come in. That includes reading books, practicing spells, meditating, learning from leaders. And then if they are brought in, the initiation ritual is secret, but it does involve being naked, joining a lighted circle, and taking vows to the gods.
Once initiated, they become a priest or priestess. They can advance to high priest or high priestess, just like with Freemasons and other secret organizations. And much of Gardnerian Wicca is focused on observing seasons, performing spells, and joining a coven. Yeah,
and we'll talk more about what they believe in their belief section. So that was Gardnerian Wicca. There's also Alexandrian Wicca, because like any other religious movement, there are divisions, even while Gardner was alive. So Alexander Sanders, who lived 1926 to 1988, founded the second most popular denomination within Wicca. Also was British, also fascinated by the occult. He was initiated into the craft. Again, these are all terms that are used. In 1962, he became a high priest, and he is known as the King of Witches.
Okay.
But there are some similarities to Gardnerian.
Yeah, they're similar in how they do things, their protocols, their ceremonies, and how they get into and out of, or get into it, and their practice of skyclad, or nudity.
Yep. Then Dr. Cooper talks about eclectic Wicca, which is just a smattering or a gathering. He says that's actually the largest denomination today. Technically, it's non-denominational.
Yep.
It draws from any source available. But he listed a bunch of denominations. I just fascinated. There's always denominations.
The American Celtic, Church of the Crescent Moon, Circle, just Circle, Coven of the Forest, Deborah, Witchdom, Dianic, Far and Forever, Frosts, Georgian, Maidenhill, Northern Way, Nova Wicca, Seax Wicca, Seax, and Thessalonian.
Yeah, so perhaps some of those names mean something to you. It just fascinated me. There's so many.
Denomination we think of as like a church, type of church that's a Christians only, because that's the common parlance of talking about what a denomination is. No, there's so many denominations. It's just a way of saying the way it's named.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a word that means the name of it, so...
And then just as we close out this historical section, he mentioned Wicca today. He says, so yes, they do practice communal nudity, but they are rugged individualists of modern Western society. So they prefer to practice rituals in small, clandestine communities rather than seeking converts. But they have, and you may have noticed this, a vibrant public presence online and in bookstores.
I've been to a bookstore, too, where they had a section...
Yeah,
I think there's one in Asheville still that does. I don't think it's a Wiccan-only bookstore, but anyway.
Okay. And he points this out. Their beliefs and values resonate with young people, particularly those deeply concerned about the environment. That's where they attract a following.
So they have religious writings. We've
Like every other group.
alluded to them, but there's not one sacred book that teaches beliefs and practices.
Right.
There are several because of the key roles and denominations, and because, as you just said, even though there's some assembly and some things that they all do, it's highly individualistic in how it all plays out. Margaret Murray is called the grandmother of Wicca, 1863 to 1963, and she wrote a classic text called The Witch Cult in 1921. And it resurrected names, symbols, seasons, and rituals from history that Wiccans still use today.
And that was particularly influential because it was within the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, it made it.
Right.
It made it as an officially recognized thing.
Yeah. After her came Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947. He wrote The Book of the Law, and that influenced Gerald Gardner.
And I think many folks have heard of Aleister Crowley.
Sure.
Crowley.
I've heard of Margaret Murray.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
That's good. I hadn't. There you go. Gerald Gardner wrote The Book of Shadows, as we said, and that's a how to be a witch guide.
Yeah, How to Be a Witch Guide. I don't think it was meant to be public at the time. How to Be a Witch Guide. So it is the standard book of spells and rituals that Wiccans use today, which is why we talk so much about Gerald Gardner.
Yeah. You will hear about the Book of Shadows.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
So it includes things like casting a circle, which we'll talk more about, drawing down the moon, we will define that, the initiation and advancement of members, we'll talk about that, observing sabbats,
Yeah.
chanting and casting spells. So encourages those things.
Yes, and they also encourage writing their own version of spells, rituals, and practices.
Make it personal.
Yeah, and many other Wiccan writers have published through a publishing arm called Llewellyn Worldwide.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the entire publishing company.
Yeah.
Llewellyn, yes.
Yeah.
I am reading that right.
All right, let's get into what they actually believe.
Yeah, well, there's no single authority or canon, varied beliefs and practices, but there can be some things said.
Yeah, so there's what's called the 13 Principles of Wiccan Belief that was published in 1974 by the Council of American Witches. You can actually pull this up on the website. I'm going to go to it now, Scott, if we just want to read these briefly.
The Internet Book of Shadows?
Yes, the Internet Book of Shadows. You can just pull this up. It has Principles of Wiccan Beliefs from 1974. There are 13 of them if we just want to read through them quickly.
Number one, we practice rites to attune ourselves with the natural rhythm of life forces, marked by the phases of the moon and the seasonal quarters and cross-quarter.
Very much tied to seasons and moons, etc.
Yeah, that's that nature's
That's number one.
processes.
Yes.
We recognize that our intelligence gives us a unique responsibility toward our environment. We seek to live in harmony with nature, capital N, in ecological balance, offering fulfillment to life and consciousness within an evolutionary concept.
This is, again, appeals very much to young people with the concern about the environment.
Explicitly says evolutionary. Number three, we acknowledge a depth of power far greater than that apparent to the average person. Because it is far greater than ordinary, it is sometimes called supernatural, but we see it as lying within that which is naturally potential to all.
This is important. It is not a supernatural power.
It's a big deal.
It is tapping into that which is natural and available to all.
But not everybody gets it. Not everybody knows it. Not everybody taps into it. Yes. Number five?
Four.
It's funny. I was looking directly at the number 4. We conceive. We conceive of the creative power. That's a capital C, capital P. We conceive of the creative power in the universe as manifesting through polarity, as masculine and feminine. And that this same creative power lies in all people and functions through the interaction of the masculine and feminine. We value neither above the other, knowing each to be supportive to the other. We value sex as pleasure. That's an important distinction in some ways, though they'll say we value sex as pleasure, as the symbol and embodiment of life, and as one of the sources of energies used in magical practice and religious worship.
So here's that polarity, masculine, feminine, true egalitarianism coming in pairs. Yep, that was number 4.
Number 5, we recognize both outer worlds and inner, or psychological worlds, sometimes known as the spiritual world, the collective unconsciousness, inner planes, etc. And we see in the interaction of these two dimensions the basis for paranormal phenomena and magical exercises. We neglect neither dimension for the other, seeing both as necessary for our fulfillment.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this, but Wiccans are very much interested and devoted to things like tarot card reading and palm reading and psychics, and tapping into the paranormal is huge.
Yeah, collective unconsciousness, you'll hear sometimes, spiritual world, of course, too. But number 6, we do not recognize any authoritarian hierarchy, but do honor those who teach, respect those who share their greater knowledge and wisdom, and acknowledge those who have courageously given of themselves in leadership.
Yeah, keep going.
Number 7, we see religion, magic, and wisdom in living as being united in the way one views the world and lives within it. A worldview and philosophy of life which we identify as capital W witchcraft, the Wiccan way. Number 8, calling oneself witch does not make a witch, but neither does heredity itself, nor the collecting of titles, degrees, and initiations. A witch seeks to control the forces within her/himself that make life possible in order to live wisely and well without harm to others and in harmony with nature.
Without harm to others is a key thing. Some will deviate from this, but the official practice of witchcraft is it's never meant to cast a spell to harm someone or something like that, at least officially.
Yes. Number 9, we believe in the affirmation and fulfillment of life in a continuation of evolution and development of consciousness, giving meaning to the universe we know and our personal role within it. That's a complicated sentence. Number 10, our only animosity toward Christianity or towards any other religion or philosophy of life is to the extent that its institutions have claimed to be the only way and have sought to deny freedom to others and to suppress other ways of religious practice and belief.
So their only concern with Christianity would be Jesus himself, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me."
Yes. Not stated there explicitly,
but that's clear.
But yeah. Number 11, as American witches, we are not threatened by debates on the history of the craft, the origins of various terms, the legitimacy of various aspects of different traditions. We are concerned with our present and our future.
This is an easy way of being dismissive to say, you can argue this is new and that it's eclectic and pulled together. We don't care.
Yeah.
Say what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 12, we do not accept the concept of absolute evil, nor do we worship any entity known as Satan or the devil, as defined by the Christian traditions. We do not seek power through the suffering of others, nor accept that personal benefit can be derived only by denial to another.
Right. So just to be clear, they do not worship the devil, even if they're involved in occultic practices.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But just they specifically say they don't. So let's not accuse them of something they don't do, even if it's unwittingly tapping into what we would call demonic forces. It's not the same thing as choosing to worship the devil.
Sure. You always need to understand people as they're trying to communicate what they're saying they believe. Mm-hmm. Number 13, last one here. We believe that we should seek within nature that which is contributory to our health and well-being.
So those are the 13 principles of Wiccan belief from 1974, available on the internet by the Council of American Witches. So no single authority or canon, but those are available.
This was at sacred-texts.com. Sacred-texts.com.
All right, let's finish off their beliefs. Dr. Cooper talks about, this is interesting, the wheel of the year, Sabbat, and Esbats.
Yeah. They believe that nature's sacred,
which you should have picked up on by now.
Base their year on the seasons, the phases of the moon, the rotation of the sun. And so the wheel of the year is 4 lesser Sabbats, S-A-B-B-A-T, the solar events marked by the 2 solstices and 2 equinoxes.
So hopefully you're familiar with the solstices are, the winter solstice, the summer solstice, right? December 21, June 21 or thereabouts. The 2 equinoxes, vernal and autumnal.
Yes.
Vernal and autumnal, like March 21 and September 21. Those are what those are.
It's pretty impressive, the dates specifically, people. Wow, that's good. I couldn't have come up with anything remotely.
The only reason I know them well is because I hate the fact that the days get less shorter, starting June 20th or 21st. And I live for December 21st when it turns around and the days get longer. And so I know the solstices. I know the equinoxes.
Wow. Wow, we've touched on something for Mark here, I guess.
All right.
So the 4 lesser sabbats are the 2 solar events marked by the 2 solstices and equinoxes, and the 4 greater sabbats are the 4 midpoints between them.
Yeah, so they just break it up further.
Yeah. They are based on annual seasons, but they carry religious significance also.
So those were the sabbats. The esbats.
ESBATS.
So the sabbats are in connection with the sun.
And the esbats are the moon.
Right.
Associated with the lunar calendar.
Right.
Wiccan covens gather once a month during the full or the new moon. This is the most ideal time to cast spells and perform magic because of the moon's energy.
There we go. So we mentioned magic several times, and you can spell it different ways, M-A-G-I-C, M-A-G-I-C-K.
Or just I-K occasionally. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Aleister Crowley defined magic as, quote, the art or science, which is it, of causing change in conformity with will. I was having trouble understanding that. But it's, again, it is not supernatural. It is natural. It is learning to harness all the energy in our body, the planet, and in our deities. Our deities.
It's a pretty vague definition. Yeah. Causing change.
Yes.
Okay. If I'm the one like doing the magic, I'm causing change in conformity with will. My will, someone else's will.
I wasn't sure.
The world's, the natural will in the skies.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Magic is never meant to be used for ill. We read that in their 13 principles. So any ritual or spell can be performed as long as it does no harm.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it violates Wiccan ethics to cast spells that harm people.
Except there are Wiccans who are involved in gray or black magic rather than strictly so-called white magic.
Yeah, gray or black magic, meaning there's some harm involved. Yeah.
Yeah. So the concept that we talked about earlier of goddess and god.
Yeah, let's talk about that some more.
They believe in equal and complementary deities,
mm-hmm.
goddess and god. Wicca can be described as bitheistic, duotheistic, or binitarian.
Right, the two.
As opposed to Unitarian or Trinitarian.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, however, goddess has a slight upper hand.
Yes.
In Dianic Wicca, the goddess is the exclusive deity.
Yeah. So the goddess symbolizes fertility and oversees the moon, whereas God is a hunter and rules the sun.
The Wiccan goddess is also called Maiden, Mother, and Crone, C-R-O-N-E, and that corresponds to the phases of the moon.
When the high priest invokes Mother Goddess to enter the high priestess, I'm going to say it again. When the high priest calls upon Mother Goddess to enter the high priestess, that is called drawing down the moon. And that's done within the circle, within the coven, at very specific rituals. That's
spiritual entry.
Yes. There's a possessing and entering there.
Yes.
Yeah.
A possessing, yes, as we would say. Which is a different term in a sense than the entry, because you can talk about inside out differently than possess, because there are some nuances and distinctions there, but we would say possess. Some Wiccans believe there are only symbols or archetypes, and they're not real deities.
Right, so there's some difference of opinion here, right?
Yeah, and they often invoke other small g gods whose names vary according to time, geography, and religion. And most covens have patron deities to which they are particularly connected. They have a relationship where they're dedicated to one in particular or a few in particular.
Dr. Cooper says there are 3 principles of this goddess-god thing: immanence, interconnection, and community. So immanence, he says, they believe we are each of us is a manifestation of the living being of the earth. Nature, culture, and life are sacred. We must preserve all life because caring for the earth is caring for the gods. So there's an immanence in which we are part of what it means to be deity.
Yeah. Withness.
Right.
Number 2 there of the 3 principles of goddess and god is interconnection. All being is interrelated. We are linked with all of the cosmos as parts of one living organism. We cannot separate the pain a human feels in loss from the pain a forest feels.
Right. We can't separate those two. That's why there is such concern for the environment. And then community. Religion is communal. The primary focus is not individual salvation, but the growth and transformation that comes through intimate interactions and common struggle. So those are the three principles of goddess-god connection.
Immanence, interconnection, community.
Yes. And you can see how that would appeal to many young people.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, last part of our beliefs, and this is probably a good place to stop.
Yep. Coven autonomy.
Yeah.
Each coven has their own everything.
Yeah.
In a sense. No coven can dictate what another does. Each is led by a high priest and priestess. And those leaders personify the twin deities of Wicca, and they have oversight for their coven.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. We will, in our next episode, talk about worship practices, and then how do we relate and how do we respond to this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So join us next time.
Thank you.